Thanks, Liming, for joining in this conversation with Asia Biz today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's my pleasure to be here.
So, can you tell me a little bit of background of FESSIA? I mean, I believe it's a relatively new organization.
Yeah,
So, I mean,
correct.
given your past experience
Correct.
running similar organizations, I mean, what's the intent behind this, and what is the purpose you plan to achieve?
Yeah. So FESSIA is indeed new. We started the whole operation since September last year. And that is also following the announcement of the Climate Breakthrough Award, which I was very honored to be the awardee of last year. And it's because of this award that enabled us, a number of us who used to work on the clean energy deployment side, to move into the establishment of FESSIA, the new storage and system integration alliance. And the reason for doing this is really because after years of working in the ASEAN region, or in the Pan-Asia region, on the clean energy deployment side, you do see that all these efforts you put into, or like making and pushing for the clean energy deployment, is really starting to hit kind of like a constraint. And this constraint is actually held and defined by the grid or the power system side of the readiness to take in more variable renewable energy. And that's why it's like time wise or urgency wise, it's really like now, like we need to move on to the other side to look into how grid can be more like flexible, and the system integration side can be more ready to take more variable renewable energy.
So, what's the structure of this organization? How is it going to be? I mean, is it going to be membership driven?
Yeah.
What kind of companies and industries are you looking at having as members?
It is a member-driven organization. It's a membership-based alliance. It's a business alliance, and it's not technically, strictly speaking, a trade association, but we function very much similar to a trade association in that we do provide our members with the policy advocacy kind of like work as our core business, and also other networking and other kind of like business matching opportunities. And coming back to the core activity, which is the policy work, that is, like I said before, like we see this needs on the policy, on the grid, on the system side to be ready to feed, or to be able to commensurate on the development with the VRE development on the other side. And a number of like the storage related policies is not really there, and the policy framework or the bigger kind of like investment related kind of policy signals not really there. That is why the core business is really to work on the policy side of the thing together with the industry, and to ensure that effective engagement between the energy storage and the renewable energy industry is happening with the national government, with the utilities and the system operator in the region. And we're regionally headquartered, covering the whole ASEAN region, but with a tiered market kind of approach. And our tier one is Philippines and Vietnam, which are also like the market that in the ASEAN region have the highest penetration rate for the renewables, and also in the most urgent kind of like state of flexibility, like kind of solutions. So ASEAN regionally headquartered, Singapore is our headquarter, and cover the whole country, the whole region, using a tiered approach, where we will also have country team to be stationed in these selection markets.
Right. So, in terms of this whole renewables industry and energy storage systems, how do you see the countries in Southeast Asia? I mean, you did mention a couple of countries, Vietnam, Philippines.
Yeah.
So, I mean, how are they prepared? I mean, what is the stage at which different countries are currently?
Right. That goes back to the tiered approach. We do see that this region is not homogeneously like at the same stage of development. Some of them do have high share of VRE penetration already, like the Philippines and the Vietnam, which is also our tier one market. Some of them are like still need a few years to further develop their solar and wind projects. And that's why we see like Vietnam and Philippines to be the first one that we will target. Also, in terms of like the market design or the electricity market design, the region also give us like very different kind of like examples to kind of like testing, okay, what is the best kind of way, or what is the best kind of like policy and market mechanisms that should be introduced. for example, in Philippines, that's does have a fully functioning wholesale market and fairly developed ancillary service market, then for them there is that's more market driven, market based kind of solution that need to be introduced to really, and it's about harmonization between the regulatory side and the market side of the design. But on the other hand, Vietnam representing a number of the rest of the market in the region, which is like still a vertically integrated system, lack of a wholesale market, lack of like electricity market functioning to play such a role. How do you still working with such a command and control kind of like mechanism, or and but still able to find the right kind of like policy or the right kind of like price kind of like signals back into the investor side. And so this region, there's two different type of like markets that we're working on, does offer us enough kind of like space to explore how we can provide the right kind of like incentivize the policies applying to this two type of markets.
Right. And what has been your understanding of the government approach towards this? I mean, how have you already started
Yes,
dealing with government?
we are starting. Well, it's more like from our previous experience on working with the clean energy or the wind energy deployment that we've already got a quite deep understanding of how the market is, how the regulators, how the government side is thinking about the clean energy deployment, about energy transition, and also existing kind of network within the in the government side of the stakeholders. And we do see that in both these two tier one markets, Vietnam and the Philippines, increasing emphasis on energy storage services for the market and increasing kind of like introduction of different circulars and degrees being introduced to the market to try to provide incentives for the battery sector to scale. But what is lacking is still a holistic way or a holistic kind of like to market pathway being fully introduced to really kind of like attract the investment in scale. And that is where we are. And we're also quite confident that's the role that we can play. And also bringing the previous experiences of advocating for the offshore wind to be introduced into these markets and using those experiences of helping the factory or the energy storage industry to find the right route to market kind of pathway in the region.
Right. So, looking ahead, where do you see the whole energy storage and grid modernization in the ASEAN region? I mean, where do you see the uh, progress coming in over the next 5 to 6 years?
First, it will start with the battery energy storage being having a pathway for scaling, and then we will see like long duration to come in gradually into the market. And in the meantime, almost in the meantime, we also need to look into the wider system integration challenges. And that lies in like the transmission side, the different grid related kind of like development and the grid core related kind of design to encourage better integration of variable renewable energies, and also like on the wider supply chain side of the grid of the transmission asset and others.
Now, as we speak, I mean, with the development of the energy storage systems and switch to renewables, there is also the challenge of net zero goals. I mean, the whole sustainability equation as well. So, where do you see FESSIA as an organization also playing a role there in terms of, helping circularity for the industry? It's a nascent industry. So, I mean, if we were to put in place practices right at the beginning, maybe we won't repeat the mistakes of the past.
Right. I think for us, we do see the bigger net zero kind of like goal, or the net zero kind of like target to be the main backbone or the main drivers for the energy transition in the region, which will we feel that that's the kind of like the bigger backdrop kind of driver. And all this like fast work or all this energy storage or to get the system site to be more ready is also contributing to that goal very much, and also complementing to the variable renewable energy kind of ambitions to be penetrated into the grid, like making that, facilitate that, enabling that to happen more possible. But for us, how this the policy side really can work for us is that we do want to address like a few key challenges. The first one is really to provide the right kind of like revenue certainty or the revenue return kind of confidence for the investors so that we really see sizing or the scaling of the investors coming into the energy storage side. And that is currently missing. And this is also fundamentally lies in the lack of the wider kind of like revenue return possibilities for the sector for now, which is almost the first thing that we want to look into. Along that whole side, we also want to look into a whole set of like kind of like a framework of different policies that also need to be put in there to allow all these signals to be there, but then other policies on permitting, on even like classification issue, on the supply chain, on the finance, to be also ready to allow this scaling to really happen like systematically.
Right. So as this energy transition takes place in Southeast Asia, how do you see, uh, de- decarbonization across Asia's power systems? Because that part of Asia, I mean, Southeast Asia has got so much of legacy power
Yeah,
production facilities.
yeah.
So how do you see that whole transition happening?
It is happening, and that is mainly being led by solar and wind and other renewables, like increasing their penetration into the system. And it's also hitting, like I said, a bottleneck or kind of like hitting the constraint. That is how can the system take that in? And how can the system provide the right kind of like flexibility and how the system can really give the right kind of like the bigger environment to ensure that this VRE high penetration is happening really like systematically or can really happen like according to that ambition. And that is the part that we see the storage needed to pick up a wider kind of like look into the solutions on the flexibility side of the choices and how to make the strategic choices among different technical kind of like possibilities, and also how do we view the wider system integration challenges with a holistic and more systematic kind of optimization view to be put into the right place, and ultimately to change a lot of like the mindset um, of how the current system is being operated and how the whole kind of like system side of the thinkings can be more open to the new kind of technologies and new different like demands coming from new technologies, so that we do see that the system side or the grid side is responding kind of like to the needs of the whole decarbonization needs of the on the grid side, on the
Right.
wider system side. Yeah.
Doing a bit of crystal ball gazing, I mean, let's say the year 2030,
Uh-huh.
I mean, what's the ideal scenario would you like to be in? I mean, in terms of energy transition in Southeast Asia, what kind of systems and processes you would like to see in place?
We yeah, first we see those power development plan targets to be broadly on track. Not to say that exactly like the numbers will be met by that year. Maybe there will be like certain delays on meeting certain target numbers, but broadly on track so that all those ambitions are being met in general in that trend. And that is not being like stalled by the lack of storage or the flexibility on the system side. The system side of planning on how the flexibility should be built into the energy system, kind of like becoming the mainstream kind of thinking on the system operator side, on the grid operator side, built very deeply into their planning. And concrete measures, concrete kind of like policy, regulatory, and market signals being widely kind of accepted and understood and introduced and translate into policy measures so that really can be like perceived on the other side for the storage sector. And we see the scaling of this energy storage happening or start to take place before end of this decade.
So energy is a very male dominated sector.
Yes.
So what's been your personal journey? I mean, and
It's hard. I think if one word is hard, it's male dominated. And all this usual kind of like women's kind of hurdle on penetrating the kind of corporate space or the, yeah, taking taking more prominent role in this space is applying, but also with energy sectors kind of like historically being dominated by male, this is like kind of like even more of an issue on the gender balance, on the gender kind of like participation, inclusion side of the thing. Um, but I think for the other ladies, I think the picture is changing, especially with new energy coming, the new energy or the renewable energy coming into the picture. This sector is providing female with more opportunities, even into the leadership role. But I still think that for women, this is the time really, on one hand, that we are in a very different timing, that opportunities are more, opportunities are being opened up. But on the other hand, I think we also need to be more aware of the challenge. And I do also do think that this generation had a much higher awareness of this challenge. And also probably because of that awareness, also more equipped of how to deal with that. And I think a lot of that coming from to deal with a number of that we still need to, on the one hand, appreciate some of the softer powers that we also possess, like resilience, like flexibility, like the patience to navigate, like especially kind of complicated kind of a contextual situation, like to champion all those kind of soft powers that we are naturally kind of like more strong, more endowed with, and also yeah, take that on and take the opportunities that this timing is giving us, and then championing on this and together holding other female um, in hands and try to elevate this whole issue. I think that's the only thing solution or the observations or the reflections from all these
right.
years.
So in your experience, do you see the younger generation more excited to come into this whole climate change space, becoming, energy
Yeah,
space?
I started to work on climate like about 20 plus years ago. That was when climate issue was really marginal. I have to explain to people what is climate change. Examples are coral reefs, examples are polar bear, which we now almost don't have to do because all those baseline kind of awareness on what is climate change is almost has been done. And also the past 10 years or the past 10, 15 plus years was on the energy transition. Really like to kind of like talk about renewable energy, talking about like the new energy, how they can be mainstream, which is also taking place now. So seeing that trend, like climate being mainstreamed, being understood by the wider public, and being also one of the topic kind of topping the global kind of policy and political agenda is something that already kind of like prepare the grounds. And same for the energy transition, which is also happening, like from a niche kind of technology to more mainstream in most of the market, in most of the geography around the world. That is thanks to the technology's progression or cost reduction and all its own reliability and all on this bigger kind of context of climate change and the transition needs taking place really like global. So that is like the bigger kind of like where things were different 20 years ago and where things are at today, kind of like contrasted really very dramatically. And that is why when you see nowadays the young people coming into the sector, the much more first the volume is really much more bigger, much more high. And people think this is a more serious job. This is a long-term job. This is really the way to enter into the energy sector. This is the future of the energy sector. So you see that fundamental shift, a fundamental difference, rather than people coming in for a niche market, kind of like a relatively niche kind of like pursue on sustainability. This is now becoming the mainstream energy topic, the energy choices for the future. So that's why you see like fundamental difference.
Thank you very much, Jiming. That
Thank
was
you.
pleasant speaking with you. I think we covered
My
a
pleasure.
wide range of
Yeah.
discussion within the topic. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks.
Thank you.